S.S.S. Tzav, Shabbos, Parshas Parah, and we are making our way toward Pesach now. Purim passed almost a week ago already. Just a couple of weeks to Pesach. We have so much to prepare. First of all, physically, we know the physical preparations for Pesach we all know about. But really what we're going to concentrate on here over the next couple of weeks is building our way toward Pesach spiritually, so we come to Pesach feeling like we could accomplish something, feeling like when we go through Pesach and when we prepare for Pesach, we're different people. But in the meantime, very interesting, I'll give you a little background on something, the way the Nesivos Shalom Shir works here every year. Baruch Hashem, like we say, we're somewhere around 720 something straight weeks now. And let me tell you the way I do this, the way I prepare for the Shir, and I'll tell you why it's interesting this week. So normally, right after Shabbos, on Motzei Shabbos, I sit down, and I like to use my Motzei Shabbos to learn Nesivos Shalom, to prepare next week's Shir. So what I do is I look back, I start going back to a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, just to sort of make sure that I don't say the same piece and the same Shir 2 years in a row. And this past Motzei Shabbos was the same, and I went back 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and I didn't, I saw most of the years, Parshas Tzav, either we spoke about Parshas Parah, or we spoke about Shabbos HaGadol, or we didn't speak about Parshas Tzav itself for a couple of years. And today somebody showed me in this week's Lakewood Shopper that writes our Shir every week. He showed me, oh, did you see this week's Shir? I said, oh, let me have a look, let me take a look at it, and it's exactly what I'm going to say tonight. So, if you want to get a chazara on the Shir, whoever, as the Shir is written in the Shopper, they must have gone back a bunch of years and taken that Shir. So if you need a chazara on tonight's Shir, this is probably the first time in a long time that the Shir was saying Thursday night, and the Shir that's coming out in the Shopper tonight is exactly the Shir that we're saying tonight. Obviously, each time it's a little different flavor, but it's just good to know a little bit about our inner workings of our Nesivos Shalom Shir. And the Torah speaks about, in our Parsha, the Torah, one of the things that Parshas Tzav speaks about amongst the Karbonos is the Karban Shlomim. Now, the Pasuk says, by Karban Shlomim, the Pasuk says the following: V'zois Torah zevach hashlomim asher yakriv lashem. This is the Torah, these are the laws of the Zevach Shlomim, the Karban Shlomim, Asher Yakriv Lashem, that which you should bring to Hashem. And if you look a little further even, when we talk about the Karban Shlomim, the Torah also says, Daber b'nei Yisrael, tell Klal Yisrael Lamar, Hamakriv Zevach Shlomov Lashem, someone who brings a Karban Shlomim to Hashem, Yovias Karbonoi Lashem Mizevach Shalomah. He should bring his carbon to Hashem Mizevach Shalomah. Now the Klei Yakar points out over here, right away, on these psukim, when we speak about the Karban Shlomim, the Klei Yakar points out that by the other Karbonos in our Parsha, if you take a look, by the other Karbonos, the Torah simply says either Zois Toiras Ha'olah, and that's it. This is the Torah, these are the laws of the Karban Oila. Or the Torah says, Zois Toiras HaChatos, these are the laws of the Karban Chatos, or Zois Toiras HaMincha, right, Karban Mincha. However, yet here by Karban Shlomim, it would seem that the Torah adds so many more words. The Torah says, Zevach HaShlomim Asher Yakriv Lashem. Why only by Karban Shlomim does it talk about that bring this carbon that you are bringing closer, that you are bringing to Hashem? Also, in the other pasuk that we mentioned, Hamakriv Zevach Shlomov Lashem Yovies Karbonai, that he should bring his carbon. The Torah adds on that words, not by the other Karbonos, only by the Karban Shlomim. It's only written here and not in all the other places in our Parsha. The Torah also says, Yodov Tiviena Esishei Hashem. By the Karban Shlomim, your hands should bring to the Mizbeach, your hand should bring this Karban Shlomim, once again, terms that are not used by any other korban. It would seem that something is very unique because that the Torah doesn't write things in one place and other places. It was something that seemed to be very unique about the korban shlamim. So the Zohar in Chelek Gimel tells us something very interesting. Also interesting about a korban shlamim. The Zohar tells us that the most beloved korban to Hashem is a korban shlamim. Why, says the Zohar? Because a korban shlamim creates shalom, right? The word shlamim creates shalom between the worlds below and the worlds above. Well, of course, we're going to have to explain what that means, but that's what the Zohar says. Korban shlamim is a favorite korban to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because it brings peace. It brings shalom between the worlds above and the worlds below. And the Medrash Tanchuma tells us, Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Zu chaviva alai, this korban shlamim, right? This korban is the most beloved to me. Gedolim hashlamim. Why? Shem oisim bein Yisrael abiyim oisim shalom. It makes shalom between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. Tremendous things. But why? Why korban shlamim? What's korban shlamim doing different? And not only that it brings shalom, it also brings shalom between the Mizbeach, the Kohanim, and Klal Yisrael. So says the Medrash Tanchuma, that a korban shlamim, there's three things involved in a korban all the time. There's the Kohanim, and once again, we have the Kohanim sitting here. You have to know these things. The Kohanim bring the korban. The people of Klal Yisrael, a Yid brings the korban, and the Mizbeach is where the korban is being brought, and the korban shlamim makes peace amongst all of them. Why is that? Because the reason for that, as we know, says in Nesivos Shalom, that a korban oila, we know, goes totally to Hashem. Right? The korban is brought on the Mizbeach, totally burnt. The person bringing the korban doesn't get anything. By a korban chatas, the dam and the emurim are burned on the Mizbeach. The Kohanim get some parts of the animal by a korban chatas, but what does the person bringing the korban get? He only gets a kapara. He gets forgiveness, but he doesn't get any of the korban. But by a korban shlamim, it's different. The owner of the korban shlamim, the person bringing a korban shlamim, he received the meat of the animal. He received the meat of the behemoth to be able to eat it too. So therefore, we call it a korban shlamim. Why? Because it's a happy time. It's peaceful. Everyone's getting something. The Kohanim are getting something. The Mizbeach is getting something. And the person bringing the korban gets something. When everybody gets something, so it makes everybody happy. Everyone is pleased. Korban shlamim, it creates peace amongst those bringing the korban. But what does it mean that it brings shalom between Klal Yisrael and Hashem? How does a korban bring, why only a korban shlamim, and how does a korban bring peace between Klal Yisrael and Hashem? So the Nesivos Shalom answers with a yesod that we've spoken about many times, and it fits into this narrative. It answers everything we need to know very beautifully. And Nesivos Shalom says there are two madregas, there are two ways for a person to serve Hashem. One way is to serve Hashem like an Eved. A person is an Eved Hashem. He's an Eved, and what does an Eved do? An Eved does everything he's instructed to do. You're hired to do a job, you do a job. But then there's another way of serving Hashem, and that's serving Hashem as a ben. Serving Hashem as a child. If you ever notice, we daven in Rosh Hashanah, right? When we blow the shofar, we say, Im kivonim, im ka'avodim. Right? Hayom harasaylam, hayom mishpat. Goes from im kivonim, im ka'avodim. The Nesivos Shalom says a beautiful word on Rosh Hashanah, and he says that one of the judgments on Rosh Hashanah is im kivonim, im ka'avodim. How are we going to be zoicha? How are we going to be able to serve Hashem this year? Are we just going to be able to serve Hashem like we're doing a job? Or are we going to serve Hashem as a child? Are we going to serve Hashem as a ben? Because an Eved, when an Eved serves Hashem, as we said, he does exactly what he's commanded to do. But a son is different. How does a son serve a father? How does a son do things for the Father. His entire want and his whole drive is not about what he's doing. He's doing it to give anachas ruach, to give pleasure, to make his Father happy. When a son serves parents, it's not about what you're doing. It's about, I'm doing this because I want to do something for my parents. I want to do something for my Father. And those are two different ways. And the son will do everything possible to accomplish that task. And that, says in Nesivos Shalom, is what made the Korban Shlomim so special. The other Karbanos, if you look at a Korban Oila, a Korban Chatas, the person had an obligation to bring the Korban for a reason. If a person did an Avera, if a person sinned, you have to bring a Korban Chatas or a Korban Hasham. That's the halacha. That's what the Torah tells you to do. A person did Avera, he needs a kapara, so he has to bring a Korban. But a Korban Shlomim was different. A Korban Shlomim, the whole purpose of the Korban Shlomim was Reach Michoyach Lashem. That you are doing from your own heart. You want to bring it. You're doing it just for Hashem. And the same thing, Korban Toida, which is a subdivision of a Korban Shlomim, a Korban Toida, was done for the same thing. When a person says thank you, a person says thank you to Hashem, what are you doing? You're showing your Akaras HaToiv to Hashem for all the chesed that we receive. And that's coming from your heart. You want to give that Korban. You didn't have to. You want to. You're doing it as a ben. You're doing it as a son. You're serving Hashem in that way. You're doing it like a child who does it out of love. And that is the reason we call it making shalom between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. Because we bring it out of love to Hashem. What does a father feel like when he notices and he feels that a child is doing it, and a child comes into the house, and sometimes you don't want to wait for your parents to ask you to do something. You say, can I pour you a cup of water? Can I do this for you? Can I take out the garbage? I see many people looking at me. Can I do something to make your day easier? Can I do something that will make you proud? A person wants to voluntarily do something for their parents. And so the Torah adds the words by Shlomim Asher Yakriv Lashem. Doesn't say that by the other Karbanos. The other Karbanos, you don't have a choice. You have to do it. Right? You have to bring that Korban. But by a Korban Shlomim, the Torah adds on Asher Yakriv Lashem. It's by Dafka, by a Korban Shlomim, where you're giving Hashem of yourself. And that's the reason we bring it. We're being makriv this Korban to make Hashem happy. And an Eved, as you know, an Eved, no matter what he does for his master, he doesn't get to eat with him in the dining room. An Eved has their own dining room for the workers. But a Ben, a son, eats with the father. So when it comes to a Korban Shlomim, we all share. We're sharing. The people get part of the Korban, the Kaihanim get part of the Korban, and the Mizbeach, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, gets part of the Korban. A son is getting to eat with his father. And really, the lesson that we need to pull out of this, the lesson that we need to learn, is doing something for Hashem is so chashuv. We talk about Kaviyachol making Hashem happy. You know how we make Hashem happy? When we're happy to keep His Torah. When we're happy to do chesed. When we're happy to do His mitzvahs. When we come forward and we voluntarily do things. Just as in the Korban Shlomim, which is the favorite Korban, as we saw in the Zohar, we saw in the Medrash Tanchuma, the favorite Korban because it brings Shalom. And because we're doing and we're volunteering and we're giving from our heart, so too, in our lives, if we give something to Hashem and we step up and we do it for Hashem out of love for Hashem, then we develop that relationship between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and it makes Hashem very happy with us. I wish everybody a good Shabbos.